Is it Palestinians, though, or Hamas? Because I know Hamas has rejected every single peace deal put before them and not recognised and still do not recognise Israel's right to exist. But is that true of Palestinians as well?
Well, in the case of Hamas has to be destroyed and dismantled. There's no other way. They've shown themselves to be wholly unfit to be a neighbour to any civilised state. And so there can be no future with Hamas, and the the foreign minister is in agreement on that point. Yeah. But in terms of the more moderate Palestinian Authority, they themselves have their own problems with glorifying violence, with corruption, with their own intransigence, and also still fundamentally denying the right of Israel to exist. They have made certain remarks over the years where they recognise Israel, but never as a Jewish state. They've never said that they want a peaceful solution to the conflict side by side with a Jewish state rather than in place of it.
Are you talking about the Palestinian Authority here?
I am talking about the Palestinian Authority. The Palestinian Authority, when judged alongside Hamas, looks like a very reasonable actor and fairly moderate. And they are more reasonable in certain regards, but also they still have not been able to utter the language of recognition of Israel as a Jewish state. And when they do, when they come to terms with the fact that Israel is both legitimate and permanent, then I believe we can see an era of peace develop. But until that point, we're going to see perpetual conflict, which is where we are now.
Yes, it's where we are now. And we learned yesterday that Benjamin Netanyahu has set a date for the invasion of Rafah. This is at a time that we've seen tens of thousands of Jews protest against his leadership. How should we interpret those protests?
Well, before this war, there was a great deal of discontent in Israeli society about the leadership of the Prime Minister. There's no doubt about that. The country was divided, ripped apart really by this question of judicial reform, about the encroachment on the powers of the judiciary. And Israelis fiercely defend their liberties and the independence of their institutions. And the war and the atrocities of October 7th certainly unified the nation. But the longer it's gone on, the more we see those divisions re-emerge in terms of how the war is being handled, in terms of whether the Prime Minister is doing enough to liberate the hostages and arrive at a deal with Hamas through Qatar and Egypt. Israel's a vibrant democracy, and people will have views and they will express them forcefully. That's the nature of the state. But ultimately, the country is unified on one question, and that is the need to defeat Hamas, the need to defeat its final battalions in Rafah, and the need to do whatever necessary to get those hostages home.